Hey now, today we're going to take a look at Empire Engine from AEG. And yes, this is another one of their pouch series of games. Although, as I'll mention in my final comments, this probably should have been a little bit bigger than a pouch. But this is a little bit different than their other micro-sized games that all come from Japan. This one is much more of, and that are pretty light, this one is much more of a miniature Euro game. You are vying for control of like this steampunk fantasy world, and you're doing it, you're taking actions like attacking and gathering goods in order to get victory points, but you're doing it with cards representing gears, and the gears have to move in a certain way. Wherever the gears land on your turn, that's the action that you're going to take. But they always move a certain number of steps or sequences unless you... rotations is what I should say. They only move a certain number of rotations unless you're willing to spend resources to do more. So there's some interesting aspects at play here. Does it all come together coherently? Let's take a look at how the game is played, and we're going to come back. I'll let you know what I think. Okay, everyone's setup in Empire Engine is exactly the same, so I'm just going to show you this one little glimpse of the battlefield, so to speak. Everyone's going to get 2 of these gear cards, 2 of these engine cards are the same. They have the engines have left and right written on them, and they always have to be in the left and right position. Consequently, on the left side of your board is always going to be the ready pile for your cubes. The right side is always going to be the score pile. You need to keep those separate. Scored cubes can never be used for anything else during the course of the game. Only your ready cubes are, and your ready cubes will not be worth points at the end. They will only be used to break ties if necessary, just for total point value and who wins the game. Now these cubes, there's 3 different types, and you'll make a stock of them out here. Everyone's going to start with a red and a yellow. The red cubes represent soldiers, the yellows represent goods, the blues represent inventions, which are only slightly harder to get than the others. You also have a starting player card, and you have the round tracker. It'll be a variable amount of rounds depending on the number of players, and also how long you want the game to be personally. Now you're also going to have a reference card, and the reference card, aside from being important for keeping track of what the turn order is, which is relatively simple, they also have optional special powers on the back. You can shuffle these up and deal them out, and then each player has a different special power. They're not a huge impact on the game. They don't really fundamentally change how it works, but they can add some needed variety. So for instance, Nova Centralis here lets you turn in 2 goods to make an attack instead of spending 1 soldier, which could be significant. And I'll get back to what that all means in a second. Now, how are you going to get these cubes? Well, this is all done through actions during the game, and your engines will tell you which actions you can take. So let's just take a look at each of them, and your engines are a little bit different. So when you have this little picture here with the 2 soldiers, that represents attacking. I'm sorry, no, let me take that back. This represents actually gaining soldiers. So you see there's a little tiny +2 here. If you take this action, you get to take 2 soldiers from the stock and put them in your ready pile. This action represents attacking. You have to spend a soldier in order to attack your neighbor, and it has to be the neighbor that is in that direction. So if you attack with your left engine, you're attacking your left neighbor, and vice versa. And when you make an attack, if you do it successfully, you're going to be able to take one of their resources from them. If they don't have a resource available, you take one of their reds, their soldiers. Then you have acquiring goods. This is where you just take 2 goods from the stock, put them into your ready pile, and then on this, the last thing on this engine is you have salvage. The salvage is going to let you take any one good resource from the stock, whether it's a good, a soldier, or an invention. But you cannot take the salvage action if you were successfully attacked on your turn. Let's take a look at the other engine. Now this has the attack just like the other engine does, so you could theoretically attack with both of your engines on your turn, attacking both players to either your left and right. But it also has, let's see, defense is what we'll talk about first. Defense is, of course, what you're going to keep to protect yourself from an attack. If you're being attacked by one person and you have the defense action on your turn, you are not going to lose any of your resources, and in fact, you get a reward by taking a red cube from the stock. This represents you, I guess, taking the enemy bodies as trophies. Another thing here is you have invention. This lets you take one of the blue cubes from the stock. Just very simply take one of those. And then the last thing here is actually exporting. This lets you take all of the yellow goods that you have in your ready pile and transfer them into your score pile. Now, it's not as simple as you just selecting what action you want to do on your turn, although that is what happens in the first round. On the first round, each player is going to take both of their engine cards into hand, and then they're going to place them down, face down on the table in the direction that they want them to be in, meaning that whatever action they want to take has to be at the top of their card. Then once every player has done that and placed all cards face down, you'll flip them up, and whoever has the first turn is going to take their turn, and then you're going to go clockwise in order, and you just get to take your actions, whatever they are. Now, and there is a certain order in which the actions must be resolved. So you can arm yourself, produce and invent. Those are all resolved first. Then there's attack and defense that is resolved. Then exporting and salvaging, and I'm sorry, I missed this too. Both export and salvage cannot be taken if you were successfully attacked. If you selected those actions and you were successfully attacked, you get nothing, unfortunately. And remember that export is on the same card as your defense action. There's only one defense action on your two engine cards. So once everyone's decided that and everyone's resolved all their actions, the start player token is going to move, then it goes to the next round, and from then on for the rest of the game, the way that you're going to take your actions is different. Your engines are going to stay in the exact spots where they were from the first round, in their left and right positions. That can never be swapped, and instead you're going to take your two gear cards up into hand. One of them has a 1 on it with a subset of 0, and the other one has a 2 with a subset 3. How this works is whoever's first in the turn order is going to take one of their gear cards from their hand, and they're going to place it face down in front of one of their engines, or below it, I should say. Then going in clockwise order, the other players are going to do the same thing and lay down one card. Then the last player who took that action goes again and puts down their other card, and then it snakes back to the first player. The end result being that both players, or all players, have their gear cards below their engine cards. Then they're all going to flip them up, and they will rotate their engines that number of turns, the big number. So if it was the defense here, I just rotate it a quarter turn. It goes to the invention action. If I was on my previous turn, I was salvaging. I would now rotate it a quarter turn, and now I'm arming and taking 2 soldiers. You must move them clockwise that many turns if you're using the big number. And you might ask, well, what is the smaller number for, and how can you move other types of rotations? Well, when you're laying down your cards during the planning phase, where you're actually, before you go into the execute phase of actually taking your actions, and each player puts one down and then snakes back, when you put a card down, you decide right then and there if you want to take a soldier or a good and place it on that card, on that gear card. And what that represents is that when you flip over that card that you selected to put a resource or soldier, good or soldier on, instead of going with the big number, it goes with the smaller number, which means that if you use it for the 1 card, the engine that you put it below is now going to move 0. You will stay on the last action that you took in the previous round. If you were to put either of those on the 2 card, it is now going to move 3, and you will now take that action instead. But your opponents won't necessarily know which gear card is on which engine. All they know is that you put a cube on that card. And then when you actually rotate them, you're going to put those cubes back in the stock. And you can do it to both cards if you really want to, depending on what actions you want to take. But remember that after that first round, everything that you do is going to be dictated by these gears, and you've essentially set yourself up for the rest of the game. And that's really how the rhythm of the game. You're going to be moving your using your gear cards to rotate your engines to the actions that you want to take. You may have to spend your precious resources in order to do that, but do remember that your resources are points at the end of the game. Each cube is going to be worth 1 point. If that's in your score pile, ready cubes are only counted for breaking a tie to determine who the winner is. Whoever has the most cubes of any of the colors is going to get an extra 3 points. If there's a tie for whoever has the most cubes of a single color, then it's friendly ties. You both get 3 points. And then you'll count up whoever has the most at the end of however many rounds you've decided to have in the game, and whoever has the most is the winner. That's Empire Engine. Some really interesting things here. The first thing I kind of hinted at this at the beginning is that really they could have made this a small box game instead of a small pouch game. And the reason I say that is because a couple of things. First off, right in the rules, it says that we recommend that you hide your victory points just to keep them secret from your neighbors so that they don't know and to increase attention in the game. Well, they don't give you anything to do that. They can't. It's in a pouch. What are they going to do? They can't fit screens in there. So you have to kind of either just ignore their rule, which I don't really see a problem with, or just hide them in your hand, or find something else around the house. Find a little dish, take screens from another game. I don't know. I think that would have been an easy enough thing to put this in a smaller box like the size of Sail to India, which they also published over here in America. That's one thing. And also, there's not enough of the resources, at least the goods, the yellow cubes. Definitely not enough in both the games that we played, that we ran out of those, and we had to just use dice to represent this. Maybe this was an odd thing with our games, and everyone was going after goods too much, but if that can happen, that can happen, and it's kind of annoying that that's the case because those are supposed to be unlimited. So that's another thing, and maybe they should have at least had bigger cubes representing 5s or 10s. Well, not 10s, but 5s at least. So I think that really, when it comes down to it, not just the components, but the game itself feels like a light version of a bigger game. As if like they actually took a bigger game and said, here's the on-the-go version. And that's kind of a shame. I like the interesting concepts at play here and would have liked to see them in a bigger, more grandiose format. And because I like the theme and I like the different things that you can do, it just always felt like it was miniaturized and it wasn't able to do as much cool stuff as I wanted to do. So I guess we've just jumped right into mechanics, so let's talk about that. Because, oh, by the way, theme is nothing to speak of. This is not a thematic game. Yes, it takes place in a steampunk world. You could easily completely forget that after you finish reading out like one page in the rulebook that talks about that. But anyways, it's interesting, the whole gear mechanism. You start off in the first round, and it's just like, do whatever you want to do. But from then on, and really, that first round sets you up for the rest of the game and will dictate how the rhythm of the rest of your game is going to flow. Because once you have to start playing those gear cards, you have to go the exact amount on there unless you use your precious resources, your troops and your goods, to make them either stay in one place or move further. You have either 1 or 2 or a 0 and 3, depending on how you want to pay for it. But I say precious because this is a very tight game. The point spread is very small, and the number of points between the winners and the losers is very low. So when you do something like spend your resources to move your gears either further or less, you're giving up points. That is what you are doing. In some way, shape, or form. Either your troops, which are your ability to fight and to potentially take goods from your neighbors, or any kind of resource from your neighbors, or your goods, which are giving you up the opportunity to export them at a later date. So the game feels very, very tight and constrictive, and it's probably what I don't like about it the most, because it always felt like you were on the razor's edge of spending too much to not get enough, not getting enough bang for your buck in return on investment. But I can imagine that people, including some people that I played this with, would love that aspect of it, constantly dancing between disaster and triumph. I'm sounding way too epic about this small game, but that's the feeling that you get sometimes, because you just never know if you're making a good choice by rotating in a certain amount of turns. And by the way, always keeping in mind that you're setting yourself up for later turns by doing that. If your gear is in this certain position this turn, you can plan out several turns ahead where it's going to be at, where you want it to be at. And that's kind of like the whole Mancala mechanism from games like Trajan and Five Tribes, setting things up to be in a position you want them to be in. Every action is important and relevant. Although in this instance, unlike a game like Five Tribes, only you have control over what's going on in front of you. The whole aspect of attacking and defending is really interesting here too, but it seems really brutal because you've only got the one defense, and fortunately the defense from both sides of you. By the way, that's an aspect I like too, that you can only attack with a certain gear card that's going to your left or your right. You're only affecting that person. But knowing that if you defend, you're giving up your opportunity that turn to export goods, and again, this is another instance where you're giving up the opportunity to do something else, and strategically knowing when to do that is the most interesting part of the game, and at the same time the most frustrating part of the game. So I guess what I'm saying here is that there's a lot of interesting things that work here, but it can be stressful for such a small game. The game is very fast, and therefore you can always get that feeling that you're just getting going and just getting your system going. You're literally your engine going. That's the name of the game. And then the game is over. You can play to an extended number of rounds, but then you risk having the game outstay its welcome. So that's another difficult balancing act. But, you know, I do like the game. I do. I can see that there's going to be people that it appeals to even more. I'm sort of just it's endearing to me, the concepts of this game, and like I said, I want to see this on a bigger scale, and who knows, maybe at some point we will. But for now, I'm going to hold on to it. I want to play it more. I want to play it with different groups of people. I want to see if there's a strategy that can be refined, although I fear that, well, one person in my group referred to this as extreme rock, paper, scissors, because this counters this, and this is the best thing to do this, and I think that's a bit of an overreach, but I do want to see if those kind of patterns can emerge over time. If it's just a simple take this against that and take that against this and hope that it comes out in the best. There's no randomness. It's strictly deterministic, and so if that's your kind of game, that's definitely going to appeal to you as well. But if you're excited by the idea of combat in this game, I would caution you that this is not, it's not really how it is. In fact, combat isn't like extremely detrimental. It could even be a benefit for you if you're the one defending, or if you don't have any goods left for them to take, you get and they don't defend against it, you get a reward anyways from the stock, which is interesting. And I do like the whole set collection aspect of you get extra points if you're leading and the different quantities of the resources. That's an interesting aspect that adds even more tension. But just be aware of the type of gamer that you are. This is light, but it's not random. It can feel a little bit tense, and it's definitely more of the micro Euro. It's definitely the micro game for Euro gamers. Excuse me, as opposed to other micro games like Love Letter and Lost Legacy, and this is more of like Sail to India in that regard. So not random at all, totally deterministic. There's going to be a huge segment of people that are going to be really drawn to that and attached to that. I'm sort of on the fence, and I want to see how it plays out over time. But at this point, you probably know what kind of gamer you are, so keep that in mind if you're considering getting Empire Engine.